Hi, I'm Josh Carter, and this is Flying for Life. What does it take to become an MAF pilot? To help me find out, I'm joined by 21-year-old James Gullett from Oxfordshire, MAF UK's youngest pilot and the first to graduate from the Future Pilot Programme, a new scheme which supports upcoming British mission pilots and the cost of their training. I'm also going to be joined by Marco Koffeman, Director of the Mission Aviation Training Centre, or the MATC, in Turga in the Netherlands, where James undertook his 2-year course. Well, James and Marco, thank you so much for joining us on the pod this time round. And we're going to start with you, James. I mean, congratulations on qualifying as a pilot. In January, you're the first ever pilot to graduate from MAF's Future Pilot Programme. You're only 21, which makes you now MAF UK's youngest pilot. How does that feel?
Yes, it's a good question. I don't think it's quite sunk in yet. It's really great to get this part of the training done, and yeah, it's exciting to have the commercial pilot's license now. And I'm really thankful to God for how He's guided us over the last sort of 2 years to get this done. I'm really thankful for the training at MATC. Yeah, it's a joy to be here now.
Now, of course, this is quite new, really, the Future Pilot Programme. And actually, you were kind of a guinea pig, really, in all of this. So, how did it feel like being, part of it at the beginning? And, what was that like? Tell us.
Yeah, we've come a long way. It has been a great program. There have definitely been challenges. It's also a real blessing to be first to have a go at it. Um, yeah, there were a lot of small things to work out along the way, and the guys in the Netherlands, MATC, were really helpful in helping us figure those things out. It has certainly been intense, just really busy with theoretical training and then flying at MATC. The Future Pilot program is fantastic. You come with no aviation background, and it takes you all the way to being MAF ready, and it's of no financial cost to me, to the pilot who's learning. It's all through fundraising and support raising that MAF help you with.
Now, Marco, let's bring you in because let's get a bit more information on this Future Pilot Programme and also the Mission Aviation Training Centre that you are the director of. Now, you've had quite a lot of MAF experience, haven't you? Tell us about that, Marco.
I became a MAF pilot in 1998. I mean, that is a while ago. Um, and that was quite a struggle in those days to become a pilot and to do your flight training. And you had to figure it all out by yourself. So I started in Uganda, where I was a pilot for 5 years. That was an exciting time. The first program to be part of in Africa. In Uganda, I flew a little bit on the float plane that we had at that time on the Lake Victoria. So I was asked whether we were open to join the Bangladesh program. Lots of water in Bangladesh. So it's a lot more practical to have a float plane, or in this case, an amphibian, meaning that's an aircraft that can land on land with wheels, but also with floats. And so you can land on the river, be very close to the destination, villages where we would be bringing help or personnel. And so after 4 years, we were praying about what comes next. We were looking at Kenya for a while, but MAF was starting a training base in South Africa, and we were asked to join that. I was already doing training in Bangladesh with Bangladeshi pilots, and so training became a real passion for me. And so then we moved to South Africa, where we lived for 6 years. And my full-time job was to be a trainer, not an operational pilot, although I would still fly some operations whenever it was needed. But I discovered that really training is even a bigger passion than flying itself.
Oh,
And
wow,
so,
that's quite a statement, Marco. So you
yes,
actually
yes,
feel more passionate to train other people.
what we went through in those years, having to figure everything out yourself, but actually with a lot of uncertainty. And we did see people fail. You know, they would spend all the money, do the flight training, and then do a selection at the end, and then to hear, well, you will not make it as a MAF pilot. That is harsh. Um, and maybe it was acceptable then, but now I think in the culture that we live in now with another generation, I think it is fitting that we are more responsible, and so that we help people that are motivated for serving with MAF, that we help them make a good judgment, make good decisions. That's what we ask of them as a pilot. So we should do that as an organization as well. And that means that um, the school provide a lot of clarity about whether or not a candidate is suitable. So at the front gate, we do an entry assessment that is, we fail a lot of people, but it means that the people that go through, they're pretty certain that what they've started, if they persevere, that they can be successful.
Mm.
And so it's before you spend your money, are you sure? Well, we help them to be sure. And I think that's almost like the fundamental reason that we said, well, we need our own flight schools. There was something in the Netherlands already with ex-MAF pilots, and so we were going back to the Netherlands, and MAF asked me, "Can you pick up MATC and turn it into a formal preferred training provider?"
And also, Marco, you've flown in some pretty serious situations as well, devastating situations actually, including
Yes.
after the Boxing Day Indian Ocean tsunami, and also the cyclone in Bangladesh as well, and also during the Somali famine of 2011. So, what's it like being involved in such intense situations like that?
Yes, it is intense. In general, the sort of the personalities of people that become a pilot, and I'm no exception. We tend to sort of, put it in a little, those emotions in a little box somewhere to be retrieved later. But when you're there, you need to get a job done and need to do it safely. You start looking, where can I land? Where is a group of people that hasn't been reached? Okay, let's get the supplies in. We provide the supplies. And when you're there, you're busy with this. Um, you have no time to actually sit down and think about what you're seeing. That comes, you know, when you get home. I've been surprised by my own response, um, because you can think ahead of time. Oh, this is what I will do. This, but when a crisis comes, and you respond
Mm.
the way you're wired. Um, and yes, we do provide some of those challenges at a different level during training. But something like a tsunami or the cyclone in Bangladesh, um, you know, it is hard for anyone to deal
Mm.
with that. Um, and you just have to hope that as a pilot, you're wired correctly to deal with the situation.
And in the Somali famine, what did you see there?
I was flying World Vision into Dadaab, which is a huge refugee camp. And so I was making some pictures, I was making some video of, the kids playing around tents and the situation there. And, I was busy flying again next day. And then I got home, and a week later, it was on a Saturday morning, and my second son, Luke, it was his birthday, and I think he turned something like 9 or 10 or something. So we had a boys' party, and we went to a local bowling alley at Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. But I'm there, and I just want to make some pictures of the birthday party. And as I get my camera out, I see, oh, the memory is full. I think, oh, I'll just delete some pictures. And then in the middle of that bowling alley, I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at the faces of these kids that I photographed in the dub. And it's then that it hits me, you know. I start nearly crying, you know. I don't know what happened. I just talked with my wife, which certainly helps. And so it just showed me, actually, those emotions are all there. Apparently, I'm able to lock them up for a while. At the same time, you do need to address them and give them a place somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that story, Marco, because I mean, it's amazing what you guys are doing. And of course, when you find yourselves in those situations, that's why all the training that you've received
Yes.
is
Yeah.
so important. So how does the school operate? How kind of break it down for us in terms of stages for us, Marco? What actually happens?
So everybody starts with this entry assessment, and which means it's a psychological evaluation, a psychotechnical evaluation. That's all done through a company externally that specializes in this, and it's a MAF specific profile that you're tested against, but also 3 flights with different instructors. And at the end, we put everything together. We have a report from a psychologist. We have an analysis of your abilities.
James, let me ask you, what was that initial experience like of someone psychoanalyzing you? I bet that was a little bit scary, wasn't it?
Looking back on it, it's quite a thorough process, which is good because, as Marco said, then in a sense, you know whether you can proceed or not with the program. The flights were challenging. I remember getting to MATC and Jeroen Kniebel, the head of training, just throwing me in at the deep end. But I really actually enjoyed it, and it, as well as a confirmation, perhaps for them, it was a confirmation for me as well that this is something that I could consider and would enjoy doing. And it was a good taste of what was to come.
And James, when you say they threw you in at the deep end, what do you mean? What did you have to do?
I flew with Arwen, another instructor there who was with MAF in Madagascar, and he said to me, "Okay, there's a river down there. There's a boat sinking. This is all simulated sort of scenario. I want to be able to throw some life jackets out of the window. So if you can just fly along just above the treetop level, and I'll pretend to throw them out. And I just want to see how you can fly the plane if you can do that." I was a little shocked that he had asked me to do that, actually. Although that became the normal then from then onwards.
Yes. So, and now the listeners will think, oh, we were assessing, his hand flying skills in flight lesson 2, but really we're actually assessing very different things. We're looking at, how does he make decisions, and is he aware of the treetops? Is he aware that this is a risk? Does he verbalize this? Does he communicate? Does he take leadership, or is he leaning and looking at the instructor, to tell him what to do? So we're looking underneath at competencies rather than, doing something adventurous. But of course, it still is exciting to do.
I'm laughing at you saying he was aware of the treetops. I think I'd be very much aware of the treetops. That's for sure. Now, James, what about your technical knowledge before you started the program? Because I know from the age of 13, you'd been involved in air cadets and flying a plane then as well. Tell us a bit about that.
My father and grandfather were interested in aviation. We like to go and watch air shows. So I had that fascination as well. And then we were in Kenya for a time, as I was a missionary kid there, and I saw MAF pilots on the field, and I thought to myself, wow, this maybe is something that I could do when I'm older. And I was starting to get a small idea of what that would look like whilst we were there. And then when I returned to the UK, as you said, I joined the Air Cadets, and I did a little bit of, well, I did 2 flights, powered flying. Really, I was just sitting with someone from the RAF, and they were just took me up for a flight. And then after that, I did a little bit more sort of study into some gliding. I did sort of 5 hours of glider flying. I won a scholarship that took me to solo. So the final flight was going solo in a glider. And so that's where I got an initial understanding of flight, how the basics worked and things like that. And that was actually, God was using that then. It was just gave maybe, I don't know about a slight edge. It was just helpful when I came to MATC because I had a very basic understanding of how it worked. And so, yeah, that was really important. At the same time, God was working in other ways. I was reading books about Nate Saint and Jim Elliott. Nate Saint was an MAF pilot, and he was martyred trying to reach an unreached people group. Quite a sad story, but one that we can rejoice in now is that group were then reached after their death. But Nate Saint was a real inspiration to me and other pilots and engineers like Jack Hemmings and Stuart King, who founded MAF UK. And God was placing these people in my life and giving me an understanding maybe about what was to come. And he was slowly drawing me towards MAF. And during this time too, I returned to Africa, sort of on a short-term mission trip. And really by the end of it, I was 16, 17, I was about to go into A-levels. And I knew that I wanted to do something with God, something with mission, something with aviation, and potentially something with Africa. And that sounded like a perfect combination to me. And well, I think MAF does that best. And as I entered my A-levels, I wrote to MAF and I said, hey, how can I get involved? And the program didn't exist yet. And if I'd got through the selection process, I was going to have to raise all the money. But they said, go ahead and do that entry assessment, see what happens. And I got a positive result. And then the MAF UK HR team wrote to me and said, we wanted to launch the Future Pilot program for some time now. Would you be willing to be the guinea pig? And that was another huge answer to prayer.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Now, James, it's obviously costs quite a lot of money, this training course. I think I'm right in saying £75,000.
Yeah, I believe it is something like that.
How did you manage to get that amount of money?
So the idea of the Future Pilot program is, it says really sort of no cost to me, although you start in year 1 by raising a certain amount. Year 1 is £15,000. Year 2 is £21,500. And if you're married, then year 3 is £25,000. And you continue to raise that as you serve with MAF. So from the beginning of the Future Pilot program, I went to friends, to family. We have 4 churches in the UK that support us. And when I married Danielle, there are 2 churches in the USA that support us, both in prayer. That is incredibly important, but also financially. And again, God has been very gracious. And each year we have met our target. And so, we're really thankful for our supporters. We go together really as a team. Sure, Danielle and I will be there overseas, but we couldn't do this without those that are backing us.
So without the Future Pilot program, it wouldn't really have been possible, would it, for you to get a...
No, not at all. I, in fact, had applied to university and I was going to go do an engineering course. And then I was approached by MAF to do this program. And well, I had 2 options and I chose this one. So I'm glad I did.
How do you personally feel about asking for money, James? Because some people, don't mind that. Other people find that a bit cringy, to be honest. How do you find it?
Funnily enough, having married an American, it's a little bit different asking in the UK and asking in the States. The States want you to be more direct and ask for it, whereas in the UK, I'm a little bit more gentle, perhaps. I have found that, normally I just say if God places it on your heart to give, then please do, and that's ultimately how it's going to work. And God has provided, and that has been wonderful to see.
Marco, can you explain to us why it costs £75,000? Why people like James have to raise that amount of money? What is that cost for?
Yeah, well, it seems high. I view our training and the qualification that you have at the end is like a university degree. And of course, there's other elements. It is an airplane is expensive, and so it is expensive to insure because of the risk that insurance is high. It takes a specialized fuel, and so the cost of fuel is high. Um, and um, and I think another very important element is that the structure of the school around it. The cost is high because there's a lot of regulations that we need to comply with, and so that requires staff. Even though we have a lot of volunteers, people that have retired that are experts in certain fields like aviation compliance regulations or quality management, and they come here and they volunteer. It's phenomenal. But some people need to be on staff, and so you have the cost of staff just to keep it legal, what we're doing, and to be able to provide the qualification and the training.
And Marco, it costs £75,000 to do it,
Yes.
which is obviously a lot of money. It must surely put some people off, or is that the point?
We do see, of course, perseverance in people, and that is a very important trait to learn. And so, yeah, when people have to find the money themselves, work for it, it's sometimes it is a reason they have to stop, and that's unfortunate. But we also see, I would call it miracles. We also see God's hand in that, His provision. And I believe this strongly. There is a spiritual principle that if we are willing to move, for God in expectancy of what He will do with it, um, He will He will act. He is faithful. He is the same. That's how He makes Himself known. And we see this when you take on a mountain that seems impossible to climb. Um, he loves it when we are there because we
Mm,
need Him, and it's
Mm.
actually a great part of the training. That
yeah.
if in some people's case, money is the issue, is the mountain that is impossible to climb.
Let's come back to the program then. We're
Yes,
just breaking it down. We've talked a lot about the initial assessment, and then after that, there's quite a few exciting things, actually, isn't there? Flight
yes,
camps in Germany and a
yes,
flight simulator. Tell us about that.
yes. So once you pass the entry assessment, then you start with the PPL license.
Just to interject, Marco, there, PPL, private pilot's license. Is that right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you. So that's a private license. You can fly, but not for uh, as a job. For that, you need a higher qualification. So after with the PPL in hand, remember we are training very focused for selection for MAF. So the purpose of our training program is there should not be one flight hour um, that does not have a training purpose. So even when they fly for themselves after PPL, they have a syllabus, and we basically say, off you go find some people to fly with, and yeah. And so by the end, you have to fly to Poland, stay overnight, have passengers with you, visit some tourist place. We're sort of simulating a commercial setting where you are responsible for passengers for overnight, for is the plane safe, and what's the time and what's the weather for tomorrow when I need to get back. And you're doing all those things as a PPL pilot. So that's wonderful experience. And they can fly to the UK and whatever. The guys even fly up to Norway. We had one airplane down in Spain this week for 2 weeks just to build experience. Um, and then, but with some experience under your belt, then we say, okay, training wise, we take it up a notch, and we have 3 flight camps. And what we do is we go with 4, 5, sometimes 6 airplanes 2 students per airplane, and we go to Germany in an area where there's quite hilly or even almost mountainous terrain. And we camp out. It's a grass field somewhere. We camp there. We do Bible study together. We cook together. We have a barbecue. And during the day, we are flying. We have a number of challenging airstrips in those areas. We know the owners of the flight club there. We are allowed to use them. And some of these strips are actually, getting pretty close to some of the strips that I've seen in Africa. So it's very good training. And what do we train? We train a very specific MAF topics, something that we couldn't train yet in the PPL, but now we are doing advanced training. So, for example, how do you fly when you have mountains around you? How do you get out of a valley if you turned up a dead end valley? Or how do you go from one valley to the next, crossing a ridge? These are all techniques that we have in MAF.
And James, what was it like doing those camps in Germany and flying through the mountains and all that? How was that experience?
Yeah, it was something really special. It was a quite an incredible experience. It was great to learn off of other students because some of the students that will be there will be almost ready to go. Others will have just got some of that experience after their private pilot's license. And it's just nice to be with the instructors and to fellowship together, to study the Bible, to hang out. Normally there's a football game. The training that is provided is really good and really helpful. And as Marco said, some of those German airstrips there in those mountains or hills, they are challenging, and it was really helpful for me in terms of my overall flight training building experience.
Now, James, I haven't got any experience of flying, but I've learned to drive a car. And when I've done that, I'm thinking like when you drive at night, it's quite different to driving in the day. And when you're driving a car and it suddenly starts raining, it's quite different. I'm assuming the same is in a plane. So did they teach you how to fly at night and in bad weather?
In the wintertime, we'll do a night rating. We fly to a bigger airport in Germany, and that then goes on my license and allows me to operate a plane at night. So we do training like that, and then Marco will continue to explain. You come onto your instrument rating after you've done the private pilot license experience building, and the instrument rating, in the most basic terms, allows you to fly in the cloud, and also allows you to do more technical approaches at bigger international airports. And so with your instrument rating, that will allows you to fly in cloud, allows you to fly in the rain a bit more. When we're flying for the private pilot license, everything is visual flight rules. It means that you need to be a certain distance from the cloud. You need to be able to see the ground. You need to be able to see so far ahead of you. You need to have good visibility. And so that next set of training steps things up. And you're then able as a pilot to fly in a bigger variety, in a wider variety of conditions.
How difficult is it for pilots to fly at night when they're not used to it?
Well, it requires a bit of a shift in what you've learned so far, and especially the instrument rating. Relying on your instruments. It is sort of it feels like you're learning to fly from scratch again, because now your reference is different.
So the instruments are giving you what, like wind speed and things like that?
Well, like if you would break it down to the very basic element, when you fly visually, you're always referencing the horizon. And so even when it's, a bit gray or cloudy, there is always something there of an horizon. And when we do instrument flying, we basically simulate that you will have lost any visual reference. And so there is one instrument that will give you an horizon instead. So So you have to, even when your body feels differently, because the mind is tricky, and you think, oh, I'm turning left. Well, actually, you look at the instrument. No, I'm flying straight and level. And so that's sort of the skill that you then develop, and it requires starting again in a way.
Yeah. And then after that comes the commercial pilot's license, learning how to
Yes.
fly a much more complex aircraft. I bet that's quite a jump as well.
Yes, it certainly is. What we're after there is, we increase, so the skills are all there, but now we are applying it on an airplane that is more complicated, more complex. So it has a retractable gear, an adjustable propeller. So each time you bring power forward, you need to think also about the propeller, not just the power of the engine. Um, the cruising speed is faster because of the retractable gear and the larger size of the engine. And so you have to, step up your what we call workload management, how quickly you do your checks. And, a good pilot is someone that thinks ahead. So they're always forward planning to keep control over the flight. But, if your airplane goes 30 knots faster, you have to think and plan 30 knots faster. So, and that's one of the challenges in CPL. We simulate during the flight camps, we simulate low weather. You're in the mountains, but now the weather is low. And so in the CPL, we simulate scenarios that deal with loading and unloading and passengers and all the things that you come across when you fly as a commercial pilot.
James, let's bring you back in. I want to find out about the instrument training for you, instrument rating training. And was that
Yeah.
difficult when you basically can't see what you're doing? That's basically what it is, isn't it? And you're relying on the plane to kind of tell you. What was that like?
Yeah, it requires some adjustment. Those first few hours, it's all very different, and so yeah, you've got to adapt. I think the biggest thing about the instrument rating is that if you plan well, if you are prepared, the flight tends to go really well. I mean, you can say that for any flight, but with when you're flying IFR, when you're flying instrument flight rules, if you know all of the procedures, where you're departing from, where you're arriving, what kind of approach you're going to do, and you have it all set up, then it comes together. I was quite confident in my training and what MATC had taught me.
Yeah. No, it sounds well. With people like Marco around, you must feel very confident, I'm sure. James, what was the biggest difference, would you say, between the bush pilot training and the commercial pilot training in terms, what
Yeah,
was the main differences for you in that?
yeah, it is a different. It is different. I mean, when we did, yes, for the bush pilot training, short airstrips. They're on a slope. They're grassy. It could be damp or wet, muddy. Um, you could have a strong crosswind. I mean, you're really there with your aircraft. There's a lot you've got to think about. You got to think about your manual aircraft control. Um, you know, one of the flight camps talks about airstrip evaluations. Evaluating your airstrip. Can I land there? And when I've landed there, will I be able to take off again? And that gives you a picture of some of the intensity that will come when you fly with MAF. And then the commercial side, yeah, it switches a little bit. What's going to happen with my fuel? Obviously, it's going to decrease. Are we going to increase the fuel at any point? Refuel. Passengers coming on, coming off, and that's the reality of when you fly with MAF. Because often you do a shuttle service or something like that. You'll fly to 4 destinations, and there's going to be people always at the plane. You're in charge. You've got to determine what's getting on the plane, what can't come on. You're weighing things. You're thinking about everything from an operational mindset, and that's was really important for me in seeing that during my commercial pilot license training.
So, Marco, how much is simulated and how much is real, if you like, in the
Yeah.
air?
So if I say we simulate that, I mean that as we give a scenario for a flight. Of course, we also have a flight simulator,
Okay.
meaning a device that is resembling, in this case, a 172. And we use that for specific training. So, for example, you're learning a procedure, but it's still quite new. Now, to be able to have a flight simulator and sit there, be able to pause the machine or to put it somewhere in a context where it is, a bit more challenging, but be able to do it safer because we are in a simulator that can't crash. Well, it can crash, but wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
That's a really good device to develop skills and abilities. So when you use a flight simulator correctly in training, it really enhances the learning profile for a student. And of course, we sometimes have bad weather. I mean, we are in the Netherlands, and everything that blows over the UK, comes down here. And so when it's bad weather, we have the ability to say, okay, we have this on the program for today. We can actually do this lesson also on the simulator.
Marco, you've been taking us through, how it works at different stages. Tell us about upset recovery training.
The basics of it is upset recovery training, meaning any pilot should be trained in how to recover when the airplane is in a state that you don't want it to be. And so that means you enter, for example, a spin situation. And a spin is when one wing drops and now suddenly the nose is pointing to the ground and you start spinning while descending. And so you need techniques to recover from those situations, but especially you also need the mental capacity to overcome the, what is happening, sort of the shock or the scare that you're having at that moment. And you need to be able to, okay, I've been training this and I can recover from the situation.
And is
So
that where the flight simulator comes in? Because I'm assuming you don't obviously want to put anyone's lives at risk and have a plane actually spinning out of control.
certainly, you can do an introduction in the flight simulator, but and sort of learn the basic recovery, and then take that skill to the airplane, because in the airplane you feel, because it is real, and the feeling of risk, and I need to recover. But then actually you do need to experience what it feels like to be in a spin. So yeah, that is great training, and of course you're trained to avoid it. But yeah, for example, when you're losing visual reference and you end up in clouds, and your body is and mind is saying, oh, you're turning, but you're not, and you're responding in the wrong way, you might end up in a spin, for example. And so that is it is a way of becoming an even better pilot.
And
Yeah.
James, what was that part of the training like for you? Would you say that was the most dangerous bit of it?
I mean, I actually did it. It was less than a month ago when I did it. I did it with an F-16 pilot from the Air Force, and I mean, he threw that plane about all over the place. I actually really enjoyed it. I mean, yeah, we did the spins, and it was great to see. As Marco said, it's really important. Okay, in this situation, and I can see the ground coming towards us. What do I need to do? And you take a breath and then you act. And yeah, I'm really glad that I experienced that. And two, it was a lot of fun. We did some rolls and loops, and that aircraft, you can really push it to its limits. And so it was just nice to experience that. And the pilot I was with, he would just really, pull hard on the yoke and move it left and right. And that was really helpful for my training as well.
James, what have you most enjoyed during those experiences? I mean, during the whole 2 years, of doing it.
I've loved getting to know the instructors and hearing about their stories from when they flew with MAF. You're really getting it in a sense firsthand, and that the training is of such high quality. I've really enjoyed flying, building my own experience. I've taken Danielle with me on a number of flights. I think this summer, after I got my instrument rating, we flew in 8 or 9 different countries in Europe. I flew down to Chambéry in France in the Alps, and then through Switzerland. That was incredible. Just an amazing reminder of God's marvelous creation as we flew by the Alps and over Lake Geneva. And again, a real blessing to be able to do this and on this training program. As well as that, I flew to the UK, across the Channel, flew in in London control airspace, which is very, very busy on the radio. It's very intense, and you can see the British Airways flights and the American Airlines and the KLM, and they're all around you. And I'm in a little Cessna 172, 4 seats, and that was really something. And whilst in the UK too, I took the aircraft to a small little grass strip, 500 meters, and which was close maybe to some of those ones that we flew in Germany. And I got to fly a number of my family and friends from there, and supporters as well. And that was just, I was really grateful for the opportunity to do that and to share with them what this training program has looked like.
Have you ever had any close shaves whilst training? You know, like you thought, hang on a minute, a little bit too close to that treetop. There's a mountain. Uh-oh, you know, have you had any close calls?
For the most part, it's all worked out as it should do. There's never been a point at where I felt, wow, I was in an immense amount of danger. That was a disaster. The one that I can remember was my wife, Daniela's from the States, and I'd flown a little bit in the USA, again, building that experience. And she lives in the Blue Ridge Mountains, which is, again, a gorgeous place to live.
Yeah,
And
wow.
there was one flight I did out into the mountains, and I was trying to land at a grass airfield that was in a valley. And this can get a little bit complicated, but the wind can really be disturbed by the mountains. And I was trying to land at this airfield, and I was flying above the mountains, and I dropped in to the valley, and it got very, very bumpy. A lot of turbulence. I think the most I've ever seen in a plane. And I saw the airfield, and it was just in the wrong place really to try and land with the way the wind was. It was too close to the edge of the mountain. I made quite a high approach just to see what would happen really. Sort of, you know, I had some extra speed, some extra altitude, and I was just getting thrown around. I made the decision not to land and to fly back to where I came from. Yeah, but for the most part, it is intense and it is definitely challenging. But with the right training, you know what you need to do.
And James, one of the hurdles, or I should say 25 of the hurdles, are all the exams. Yes, 25 exams you've had to pass to get to this point. I mean, how was that? I mean, that is extreme.
Yeah, it's it's a challenge, and you do it one bit at a time. There are 9 theoretical exams. They're a little smaller for the private pilot license, and you just sort of got to study the question banks, and then it takes it up a whole other level to get something called, well, it's called airline transport pilot license exams. So once I reach 1,500 hours of flying, I also will have something called an airline transport pilot license, which is really important to fly with an airline. And that was 13 exams, and they were really tough. This time last year that I was really struggling to study all of this content, a lot of it that was just not necessarily helpful for what I was doing with MAF. And then also studying these questions, and there were failed exams, and I had to do resits, and that was hard. But again, you know, you ultimately come to God and you just say, you know, I need help and I need direction, and is this still for me? And you know, he brings comfort and guidance, and he did in that situation. And yeah, then there were 3 other exams. You sit an exam for each practical exam for each phase.
Well, both of you have done a brilliant job at describing the course, and you've either totally put people off or made people want to apply, which of course the people can apply. Applications by the end of July this year for new people taking it up. But Marco, how many pilots per year are on the course?
So not everyone is doing the flight training full time. Actually, the majority is doing it part time. So they combine working and training for most of their preparation for MAF. You know, it allows them to make money and pay for the flying. We have at the moment, I believe, at least 35 people in training. The goal is that we deliver at minimum 4 candidates to MAF each year. And we've been able to do that over the last nearly 10 years of existence. And I think we're probably upping that number to at least 5 a year. This year, I think we will be sending out 7. So we have a bit of a peak, but even next year is looking very good.
So, Marco, it's obviously quite difficult to get onto this course to qualify and to become a MAF pilot, but surely you want more MAF pilots. So it's kind of quite difficult, but also, is it too restrictive, do you think? Possibly.
No, certainly not. And yeah, I understand the question. There is a need, and we want to address the need. At the same time, can you imagine if we send out a mediocre pilot because of the need? What the impact would be of one bad landing, one crash somewhere, because we lowered the requirements and we send a mediocre pilot. That impact is phenomenal because people might die. It impacts the insurance that we pay on the rest of the fleet. It impacts the team, and it impacts the trust that people put in us when we transport them.
James, anyone listening to this who's thinking, do you know what? I might give that a go. What would you say to them?
Keep knocking on the door. God's going to either open or close it. I shared earlier about how he drew me towards this, and he's going to make it clear. So come to him in prayer. Ask people around you to pray for you. That's really important that you have people around you. Danielle, my wife, has been great, but also my wider family and friends have been really supportive, and I've really appreciated that. I mentioned, I did some gliding just to get a taste. Is this something that I wanted to do? I went back to Africa and I got involved with the MAF youth team when I was 15 years old and did a few assemblies with them. And I was knocking on the door, God, is this something you want for me? And he brought it all together in a way that I could never have imagined. And whatever it is in life, he will put the things in place for you to do it. He will be there to help you. It certainly is not going to be easy. It will be hard. But if he is there and he is your support, then you can have full reliance and trust in him.
And that's all we have time for in this episode. My big thanks to James Gullett, MAF UK's youngest pilot, and Marco Koffeman, director of the Mission Aviation Training Centre in the Netherlands. If you fancy becoming an MAF pilot, you've got until the 31st of July to apply. Check out maf-uk.org/future pilot. That's maf-uk.org/future pilot. You've been listening to me, Josh Carter, and Flying for Life, MAF UK's podcast. Until next time, bye for now.